Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Diehl. I'm currently the Vice President of the Interreligious Council of Linn County. On this morning's show, we're going to talk about, has politics become a secular religion? And here to discuss this rather interesting question, I have three panelists with us this morning. And before we jump into it, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and why this particular question interests you.
So, good morning. My name is Dr. Alison Bianchi. I am an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at the University of Iowa. I'm also the director for the Center for the Study of Group Processes, but I consider myself a social religion buff because I did a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Notre Dame and studied a lot with the sociology of religion professors there. And so these kind of questions have always interested me.
Thank you, Alison.
You're welcome.
My name is Jeff VanDerWerff. I teach and am an administrator up at Northwestern College in Orange City, Iowa. I have a long time had just a fascinating interest in the interesting intersection, I would say, between faith and politics. Northwestern comes out of a Reformed tradition. We're an evangelical institution. My research at the University of Kansas dealt with organized interests, and I studied the group at the time called the Call to Renewal, which was kind of a left-leaning evangelical group, which might sound like an oxymoron, but it is not. So,
thanks, Jeff.
And I'm Jan Schmel. I am a religious ethicist and a liturgical theologian. I work at Wartburg Theological Seminary and also pastor a brave little community called Just Church in Iowa City. I consider myself a political theologian, so the questions at the intersection of politics and religion are ones that I love to get into, these thorny issues, and have lively dialogue.
Awesome. Well, all three of you have a very awesome perspective on this, and I'm really anxious to kind of dive into it. So this particular topic kind of came to mind after I read an article, a couple different articles, but essentially the article claimed, and there's this theory that, you know, in the last 20, 30 years, people that associate with organized religion consider themselves non-religious. The nuns, as they call them, has risen considerably, right? The idea is that America is becoming more secular, and the theory goes that as that happens, people are turning to other forms of ideology, if you will, to kind of express or find what they found in religion. So politics, right? Politics now has become the quote-unquote new religion for these individuals that have fallen away from your traditional religions. So I want to throw that out there as a kind of our first question to the panel here, and anybody can jump in. Do you think there's any validity to that theory?
I'll start just because I'm on the top corner.
Yeah, go for it.
I actually kind of disagree with the premise of the question a little bit. I think that politics has always been a secular religion in the United States, starting in the 1830s with the Great Awakening, which got everybody organized and to the polls right after the Revolution. And it's kind of whipped itself up in different forms throughout our history. What's interesting now is that you're seeing a lot of indications of secularization, such that people are claiming to be less affiliated with traditional churches, mosques and synagogues. However, I'm not sure the United States is less religious. If you ask the question, for example, are you religious or are you spiritual? You might get more people saying that they're spiritual, and perhaps they're not affiliating directly with the typical mainstream religions. They still are quite religious. So I think that this goes in waves as far as how much politics and religion come together and the secularization. But I think we are in a unique time period where it's manifesting itself a little differently.
I can build on what Alison is saying. And thank you, Alison, for getting us going there. That if you think about, what are the definitions that we're working with here? A definition of religion might be a set or system of attitudes, beliefs, and practices, in which case then, yes, politics also could be said to be such. And politics itself could be defined as the complex of relations between people living in society. These things are huge categories, and I think have always been overlapping categories. I also would argue that the fact that this is maybe having some ways it's functioning as religion is no new thing. Already in 1762, Jean-Jacques Rousseau coined the term civil religion. And this was built on in the 19th century, popularized perhaps by Robert Bellah, his 1967 article. And it's been long recognized that many people in the US embrace a shared set of beliefs, values, rituals, even a set of non-sectarian sacred texts that could be in this civil religion trajectory. And so we now in the United States, what I think is really interesting is that we don't just have one civil religion. We have competing civil religions with multiple non-sectarian sets of beliefs, values, and sacred texts.
Yeah, I like both of my counterparts' contributions already. I think they're kind of shaping this. I would probably agree with Alison in the sense that just because people are leaving the church, and there can be better and worse reasons for leaving the church, doesn't mean that they're necessarily just being drawn to politics as the replacement. Some are, undoubtedly. But it strikes me that among those that remain in church, those that still hold faith important to them, many of those individuals, politics has become a religion of sorts, or one that competes. Again, if it's the civil religion aspects, this conflation, this overlapping between their faith and the nation, Christian nationalism, or if it's just the fact that faith has become a bit watered down, or kind of a therapeutic kind of deism, moralistic deism, that just is about being a good person, and really the thing I'm passionate about is getting more Republicans elected or more judges on the bench. That seems to be challenging. They're being discipled in new and different ways.
Jeff, you actually touched on something that I never really thought of before, and this is interesting. I'd like to get the panel's thought on it. So what you're kind of proposing there is a lot of the mainstream religions have, to your point, may become a little more trying to be everything to everyone, or a little bit less tangible, or a little bit more ambiguous, right, in their beliefs. Whereas politics maybe has gone the other direction, and people really understand what our two parties stand for, and it gives them a real clear line of how to be able to identify with them. Is there something? I'll have maybe Alison jump in on that. What do you think about that, or do you again just think no, it's kind of the same old thing?
It's not the same old thing in the sense that, it's manifesting itself very differently now because of the polarization, right, that's happening politically. And we also, I want to throw in, there's a generational aspect to this that's happening as well. Most of the people, not all, but on average, most of the people that are not affiliating with religions are 40 years old and younger. And so so there's this kind of interesting dynamic that's happening. There is this notion of an identity crisis, really, I think, within the United States because of like all of this transformations that's happening. And so I think people are trying to find what it means even to be an American, what it means to be religious, what it means to be political. I think these things are all kind of up for grabs right now, almost in our culture. These kind of transformations are happening, and it's again, especially with the young dynamism of the younger people, that it's changing how it is that we define ourselves, how it is that we're grasping for social definitions. Even I don't know, Jeff, what do you think of that?
I wouldn't disagree. One of the things that I've found very interesting about polarization is that for a long time, there's a set of social scientists, Morris Fiorina and his crew, that have argued that there's a myth to American polarization. That is there really a culture war? Now, they're not saying that there aren't folks that are fighting cultural battles, right? Differences, but how big are they? It's not as if America isn't divided. The question is, are they closely divided or deeply divided? And my sense, and lots of social science surveys, people's opinion polls on even the most contentious issues, whether it's same-sex marriage or abortion or whatnot, people are most of America is kind of in the mass middle, right? They're either side. So there are differences. There is a divide, but the focus so often in our media, and it's understandable, you want the sound bites, you need the clicks, you want people to avert their eyes to something else in terms of all their options, is on the extremes or the tails of the curve, the people that say the most outlandish things. And that's also built into how our electoral system is built. We have this primary process that caters to or encourages, enables, the most liberal Democrats and the most conservative Republicans, because they are having to get the votes of the most active supporters in their respective parties. And then suddenly when you come to the general election, you're left with, gosh, I have troubles with both of my options quite often. Not always, but quite often. So I think there's something to that thesis. The problem is I wonder if polarization becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if that's what we've been seeing play out, because so many of us move in the same circles, right? The big sword, we live by people that are like us. We go to church with the people that think like us. And so we end up having these caricatures or stereotypes of people that aren't us, that think differently. And so there's clearly a growing kind of divide, and we've seen it play itself out fourfold in the last 5-6 years. But I don't know if it have to be that way if we actually get to know each other, work across partisan and ideological lines. That's easier.
Yeah, another great point. Jan, go ahead. You want to say something?
One thing I think is crucial in this line of thinking is to recognize that the divisiveness is not inherently a part of it being religious or religious-like. The divisiveness is an inability to agree on maybe what truth is or what is real. And that, I think, is a really crucial issue then, to look at how people are consuming news and how people are deciding what parts of stories to tell and how to analyze what is truthful. And without then a basic agreement then about what is truthfulness or what is honest, what is real, then it's very difficult to find the way forward in the good. From a virtue ethics standpoint, then I think that one thinks about how virtuous habits are formed. And that can happen through many different things, but it's the way toward the supporting the flourishing of communal groups. And so I think there's a basic disagreement, though, in politics right now about what is the flourishing of the communal good and how many people deserve to flourish. So we have this large question of, are we able to work for the communal good of Black and brown bodies flourishing? Are we able to work toward the communal good of the earth flourishing? And we simply are not basing our arguments on the same set of truths or facts or realities.
Yeah, so you're saying that the nature of the argument has changed a little bit, or maybe different than it has in the past. That's an excellent point, one we've explored here. So I'm going to read just a quote from this article that I pulled out of The Atlantic called America Without God, and it's the one that really prompted me. This is from the April issue. And he quotes Abraham Kuyper, a theologian who served as the prime minister of the Netherlands around the turn of the 20th century. And he made this statement, and anybody can jump in on this if you have a strong reaction to it. But he argued that all strongly held ideologies were effectively faith-based, and that no human being could survive long without some ultimate loyalty. If that loyalty didn't derive from traditional religion, it would find expression through secular commitments such as nationalism, socialism, liberalism, so on and so forth. So, reactions to that?
We need the Leviathan in order to survive. This is kind of an old argument that we need, some kind of structure over us in order to sustain life. Okay, it's an argument. But I think what this quote also gets at is that there's certain kinds of behaviors that are very similar in each of these different systems, right? So you have the political system. There's certain things about knowing like what's right and wrong in your political ideology, right? What you believe in, what others don't believe in, and there's the same kind of issues. Behaviors and attitudes, just like Jan was talking about, that's in the political realm as well, right? And so you oftentimes these things it's social psychologically, they get misconstrued. They're socially constructed in the same way, and so they kind of mesh together, right? They kind of have this kind of conflating thing together, and so it creates this kind of, I think, a little bit of a myth that religion and politics are the same because we act the same way about what's right and what we think is right and is wrong, and what we believe and what we don't believe in, and who us and them are. Us is in the group, who isn't in the group is the them, right? And so those kind of things are similar in each of these systems, and so it can look like we have this big political, or religious thing over us that we have to be loyal to and obey and understand what's right and wrong and whatnot. I think that religious life and political life in the United States is a lot messier than that. I think there's a lot of negotiation going on. There's a lot of different cultures and different ideas that come in that create these different kinds of behaviors, right? And so, but right now, I'm going to push back a little bit on Jeff's thesis. Right now, I think we are in a time of polarization. It just is, right? If it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or not, it just kind of is there, right? And so we've created this system of us versus them, and this need for loyalty within our groups. But to agree with Jeff, it's socially constructed. It doesn't have to be this way, right? It wasn't built by, it's not written in stone. We can unconstruct it and create a system where we all kind of get along a little better.
But the thing that I would add there, or would build on, because as Jan was pointing out, there is this need to create virtue, right? It's not government that makes us good. As the founders got together, and there was kind of this expectation that there would be some other institution, some other means to make citizens, more governable. Okay. The problem is we've kind of retreated into our own corners or clusters. We're no longer willing to engage in the age-old expectation of politics. Politics is always about conflict, but it's conflict that's seeking consensus. And I don't think we're willing to do that. And I think it gets back to something that Jan was pointing out again. We can't agree on the facts or really what's truthful. Even if we have different ways to get it, we can't even agree on those things. And so for conflict to ever, manifest itself in consensus, however temporary, because it's this perpetual process, you have to have compromise. And right now, especially on some of these issues, people aren't willing to compromise because they think they're compromising with something that's at their core, which is so often related to faith. And so there are these fascinating, and I think you're right, Alison, constructed kind of tangle of realities.
You've both brought up such important aspects of this. And one thing I've noticed in our culture today is that people are less willing to be siloed, to have my religious part of me is here and my academic part here and my, whatever part, my active outdoors part here. But no, now we are thinking, wait, this is my life. And these things have porous boundaries. And so I do think that while Kuyper's quote is really good for, getting thinking, it is not so, I guess, finely tuned or nuanced to the way that people are actually seeking integrated whole lives, where my political being and my ethical being and my religious being are who I am. And so we find ways then that those things are and are not in tension. And those are creative junctures of both resistance and renewal. I really see those as exciting places, fraught with conflict and controversy, yes, but also very exciting and live.
So I want to maybe change direction here just a little bit, but not really. So very simple question: how do we? And I think it's probably inarguable that we have left, or maybe are currently living in a pretty contentious political environment, right? Whether that's being exacerbated by those on the wings, Jeff, to your point, of the spectrum, or on the bell curve, if you will. Or whether that's growing, right? I think that's the point. Are they just being amplified, their voices, or is it actually growing in population? I guess we'll find that out. But how do we start to kind of lower the political stakes, if you will, to kind of restore some of that, civil dialogue? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
I'd love to jump in right away here, Alan, because civil dialogue is not predicated on low stakes. Instead, what I think we need is people to be equipped to value civility and conversation, even listening, more highly. So raise the stakes on civility, not lower the stakes on what could be talked about. Great point.
Since I have 5 seconds on a Sunday morning talk show, I think that we have a really bad habit in the United States of coming together when there's an external enemy. Right? When the us and them isn't between us, but it's an external one, right? So this is how we came together during the Cold War. And right after 9/11, actually, there was a real kind of coming together and consensus. But that's kind of a bad habit that we've gotten into. So I have some friends who are in cognitive behavioral therapy that say, don't ignore the bad habit, don't suppress it, replace it with a good habit, right? That's similar. And so I think that what we should do is find a common enemy, right? That's not a warring kind of thing. So for example, if we could all get behind fighting climate change, if we could all get behind fighting, certain aspects of injustice like Jan talked about. I thought we were going to do it during the pandemic. I really did. I mean, we're still kind of in the pandemic, I realize, technically, but we're coming towards the tail end. And I thought for a minute there that we might even come together and fight that, but we were still so polarized and politicized because of these two different truths and the media behind them, right? But now I'm thinking like, all right, let's quickly replace our bad habit with a good habit that still creates an us and them, but let's fight something all together. We need something that's a real positive that we can all get behind.
Several years ago, I wrote a piece that was really to sort of speak my own tribe. Okay, it was to other fellow evangelicals, and I closed the piece by arguing that I thought, because as the Christian right, as so many on the far right moved back into politics in the 80s and 90s, and now with a vengeance. I argued that we should really issue a ceasefire. Okay, that I'm not saying people shouldn't be engaged. I agree with Jan that we can't compartmentalize who we are, and leave our faith at home. It surely is a personal decision, but it's never a private one, right? We take it out into public life. But I thought we needed to issue a ceasefire, because I really thought that in a sense, so many who are supposed to be following Jesus were really letting the world, so to speak, press us into its mold and fighting on the same level as, and that's where, again, I think this whole subject of religion or politics becoming a secular religion is very true, and maybe true for even the folks that are church, that they're drawn into this and they fight, and at great harm to their supposed witness. And so I just really think that Jesus' own parable of the wheat and the tares, let Jesus sort that out, right? Even if we could identify who's who, I mean, we're going to get it wrong. So let's go about our business. Let's engage in a civil manner. Let's try to bridge differences and find out that we actually might be closer to each other. Even if we don't have everything in common, we might be closer to each other than the stereotypes or the caricatures that are out there of each side.
Great advice. Jan, question for you here. Just got about 2.5 minutes left. Do you, to Jeff's point, being in, quote unquote, religious world, or as a reverend, right? What do you think about this idea that we are having more difficulty, again, kind of back to our original thesis, more difficulty not conflating our politics with our religion? Do you see that anecdotally or anywhere where you find that people's identity is more wrapped around politics and intertwined with their religion? I'm trying to use as many verbs and adjectives as I can to paint a picture here, but I'll stop talking. And what's your thought on that? And then we'll close with other people's thoughts on it.
Thank you, Alan. I want to step right into those spaces. I'm a political theologian. They belong together. When have they ever been apart? This is a very odd thing, right? Wasn't it King David, Moses, the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, and then didn't he lead his people out, right, of political exile? Politics are a part of the Bible. They are, when you read Isaiah, you can't preach on Isaiah without knowing, like, what horrible thing were the people going through and being oppressed. And now we're climbing this mountain. And it's not because it's all lovely. It's because we've been oppressed and killed. And now we're coming out of oppression and still praising God. And so I really believe actually that the Bible, its ethos, its context is a political context. And so is our context today. So I think, at least for the Christian religion, there's a lot of history, a lot of sacred text that shows us pretty well how to do this. And it's to stand on the side of the oppressed and to keep our eyes focused on the divine, who calls us into what is life-giving for all of creation.
And then, Alison, I just have maybe about 15 seconds. Something you want to say in closing?
I agree completely with Jan that you just can't separate the two. It's part of the American landscape and part of American history. What's interesting is that it's manifesting itself very, very differently now. And so it'll be very, really interesting to see how spirituality becomes part of our political conversation.
Well, thank you all for such a fascinating conversation. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners did as well. Hope you have a great Sunday morning. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.